from the Carillon. This is a podcast where we're going to talk to some grad students, PhD students, and other people who have done thesis work at the U of R, and sort of find out what they study in and what their fields of interest are, and yeah, we're just going to talk about it. Today with me, I have Tyler. I don't know your last name. What's your last name, Tyler?
Meadows.
Tyler Meadows.
Yeah.
And we also have a clown sitting behind me. For those of you who can't see the clown, he's wearing ice skates, and I don't trust like that. So Tyler Meadows, first of all, let's do a little intro. Tyler, first of all, you work at the Carillon, so tell us what you do at the Carillon, and then could you tell us just a little bit about your academic history, what you majored in, what you did your master's in, and what kind of universities you've been to?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm sports editor here at the Carillon, so I try and oversee the sports section as much as possible. Keep it together. Lots of UR sports going on right now. So there's the football, there's the basketball starting up, volleyball next week. So lots of stuff going on there. And as for my academic history, I was actually undergrad at the U of R, and I did my major was in psychology, and I did a minor in kinesiology. And then for my honors thesis, I did a kind of a study about social comparisons and kind of how they affect well-being and how mindfulness can kind of affect that in one way or the other. And then I went to the UK for my master's degree. I went to Cardiff Metropolitan University, which is in Wales, Cardiff, Wales.
Oh.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I left there 2 years ago and got back last year. Actually, to this date, I came back on the 19th.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, well, welcome back.
Yeah, well, it's been a year, so.
Now, okay, I don't know a lot about the UK, but do they speak Welsh in Wales? Okay.
Yeah, so to be fair, most people now, especially in the city, speak English and English only. They know some Welsh, but then there's the few people who are fluent in both English and Welsh. And as you get more into the valley and into the northern parts of Wales, it's more the first language rather than the second language or something like that,
Interesting.
Yeah, it is. So most of my classmates were either English or Welsh, and the Welsh actually get really good discounts for the tuition if you continue in school there. And so they got their masters paid a lot less than compared to me coming in as an international student.
Right.
That was really interesting, So I can kind of empathize with the international students here now. So it's a different perspective for sure.
And do you speak any Welsh now?
I speak no Welsh at all.
Okay.
My favorite Welsh word, though, I know one really one. It's cwtch. And that's to cuddle or snuggle, and that's my favorite. Yeah.
That's very cute.
It is.
I like that. I like the way that sounds as well.
Yeah. No, it's cute.
Interesting. Okay, that's very off topic, but interesting fact to know. So you majored in psychology, minored in kinesiology.
Yeah.
And then you talk about this thing called social. What is it? Social...
Mechanisms of social comparison.
Social comparison.
Yeah.
Okay, so I briefly minored in psychology, but I didn't get all the way through it. So I do not know what social comparison is. Also, maybe some of our listeners won't. So could you briefly explain this term?
Yeah, of course. So there's a couple of things for my thesis in the UK that I did. One of them is called relative deprivation, and the other one is called envy. And envy is actually split up into two versions of envy. So most of the time when we think of envy, it's kind of oh, that's a bad thing to be envious of someone, right? That green-eyed monster type of mentality. But in psychology, there's more of a disconnect into what envy is. So there's kind of the malicious envy, which would be, you envying someone who is in a position above you and wanting to bring them down.
Okay.
So like bring them down off that pedestal that they're standing. And then there's benign envy, which is, you viewing that envious of a person who's above you, but instead of trying to pull them down, you're trying to strive up towards them.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
so it's like having an ambition.
Yeah, it's more of like, you could almost think of it as role models, you have a role model whose level you want to achieve, and so you work towards their level, motivating yourself. And so that's, one aspect of comparing yourself to someone else in society. And the other aspect is that relative deprivation thing that I spoke of. And that's when you have peer comparisons and they end up in anger and resentment. So you kind of have a cognitive appraisal, or you think of the comparison, and you have a negative affective reaction to that. So a negative emotional response to that comparison. And that's the two kind of aspects of relative deprivation. We see this in sport. You can kind of think of, in a team setting, if somebody gets a starting position, let's say on the basketball team there's a starting position, and the other person's on the bench. And the person on the bench does not feel that the starting player deserves his spot in the starting rotation. So they feel anger and resentment towards that person because they're getting something that, in whatever, say it's me, in my opinion, is undeserved. So I feel anger and resentment towards that person. And usually we see that lead to negative health effects in terms of well-being, mental well-being, and physical well-being.
So social deprivation is what you use to describe feeling anger and resentment because of envy?
Correct.
Is it the same as envy?
There are different. There are actually different constructs. So when let's say we're doing a correlation analysis, you see relative deprivation correlate with different variables and more strongly than envy, which suggests that they are actually separate constructs.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay. I'm still not totally sure what the difference between envy and relative deprivation are. Could it be called a type of envy? I guess it's because I'm mixing up the psychology term envy and envy like as the word
a populist
that we use.
term,
Right.
definitely, yeah. So that's why I like the term social comparisons or mechanisms of social comparison, because that gets a little bit, we all know what a social comparison is. You comparing yourself to your peers and others in society. And under that kind of umbrella term, you have relative deprivation, which is a little bit more of a psychological definition thing, and you have envy, which, again, if you have to clearly define things in psychology. That's really important, and to make sure that we have valid constructs. So we're making sure that we're measuring what we are actually measuring, and that it happens consistently. So we consistently see it across many different people. Hundreds and hundreds of people. They score the same. They score similarly, and those are kind of psychometric properties of how you build scales and like how you try and identify these psychological constructs.
Okay.
It is getting a little bit technical there.
Okay. Yeah, I'm just kind of trying to understand the area.
Yeah.
So is this sort of the broader psychology that you study is like about emotions, or is it about social relations? Like, what other kinds of psychology do you read to help you understand this stuff?
Right. So a lot of it is health-based. So how does this impact people's well-being and people's health? That is primarily what we're looking at in, how do these, you think of social media too, that constant comparison to other people in your social network, and how that can lead to feeling shitty about yourself, really. Because on social media, people do present their best selves, and you have that constant feedback that maybe you're not good enough, maybe you have less, or you are different. So those those emotional causes can lead to problems in health and well-being.
Okay.
And so there is a thinking aspect to it, a cognitive aspect to it, and there is an emotional aspect to it as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand. And that's kind of where the mindfulness comes in as well, is to see if that can help mitigate these feelings or stop them, really.
Okay, so going into your honors paper,
Yeah.
what was it that you did your honors paper have an argument, or was it kind of like a survey or like a research?
Really what it was is it was a questionnaire, and a bunch of people filled it out. We had probably about 1,200 people fill out this questionnaire. And what we saw was we measured relative deprivation and how it affects people with symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. And that's called the DASS 21 scale, DASS 21 scale.
Were these all U of R students that you surveyed?
No. Actually, it was a little bit of U of R students, and then it was a little bit of general population. There's this platform called Crowdflower, in which you pay people nominal amounts, like we're talking 50, 60 cents, to complete a survey, and they complete it for you, and you just have the results very quickly like that. So it's a great way to gather data quickly. The only problem is it costs money, so you do need a little bit of funding to get that going.
I see.
Yeah.
Oh, that's helpful.
It is, yeah.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
So you surveyed these people. The SABS, what was it?
The DASS.
The DASS.
Yeah.
Okay.
Depression, anxiety, stress.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're measuring their levels of.
Really what it is kind of symptoms. So we're not saying that these are people who are clinically depressed or clinically diagnosed with an anxiety disorder or anything like that. That's important to note, because once you get into the clinical side, it kind of goes a little bit to a different area. So we're surveying general population. Some of them might be clinically depressed, some of them may not, but the important thing is to that this scale or questionnaire just assesses their symptoms, and they get a score from that, and then we kind of compare it to, we compare it across the sample size. So, you have people at the low end, people at the high end, and what we see is people who are higher in relative deprivation or feel those more negative reactions to their comparisons have more symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress. But when you have this dispositional mindfulness, so what it is kind of like a trait like personality, in the sense that everyone is on this continuum of mindfulness, and you can either be on the low end, the mid end, or the high end, and that can be changed too. So if you are on the lower end, you can improve yourself. If you're on the high end, you can go higher, and what we see is people who are higher in mindfulness, it's almost like they have that protective factor in the sense that people who are higher in mindfulness, even though they may be high in relative deprivation, their outcomes of depression, anxiety, and stress are lower than people who are low in mindfulness. They have those higher depression, anxiety, stress, and symptoms.
So you're not bothered as much by comparing yourself to other people if you have this mindfulness quality.
Yeah. The tough thing is you can't really identify specifically what the mechanism is that's kind of protecting. There's only a theory that's just kind of been recent that kind of suggests that it's more the acceptance factor of mindfulness that kind of protects against those the depression, anxiety, and stress kind of mental health aspects. But really we're not sure. We haven't had a theoretical framework to test out these questions for a while, and even the one that just came out was only 2017, so there's not a lot of research behind it too. So, this is, mindfulness research is, nearly 30 years old now, but really it's only started to build within the last 5 years, and it's really exploding here in the last 3 years.
I am hearing the word mindfulness a lot.
Yeah, it's a hot button thing.
Like a lot of people are doing like workshops on mindfulness and
Yeah.
like using it in therapy and
Yeah.
things like that. So,
Yeah.
do you think this is like a good thing? Are you happy to see mindfulness applied to so many things, or do you think it ever gets misconstrued?
I think there's a debate about, are we bastardizing the original Buddhist definition of mindfulness? There's that cultural appropriation factor that some people are unhappy about, which is fair. Like I would imagine that the Buddhist mindfulness is very different from the mindfulness that we have here.
Yeah, I would think so.
Yeah, and the problem with it too is when you say mindfulness, you don't necessarily know if it's that trait level mindfulness or the skill of actually doing the meditation. That's a skill that you can build towards. That's what we call mindfulness as well. And even just like the state that you are in while doing, let's say, a meditation or even yoga is good for building that trait level. Those states that you're in, we call that mindfulness as well. So there's a little bit of discrepancy in terms of labeling everything mindfulness, but there's different definitions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so it's being tossed around a lot, but at the end of the day, there's research to support that it is improving people's lives, and I think that's what we want to get to, and that's the main focus. And we might be bastardizing it a little bit, but at the end of the day, we're helping people, and that's the main priority.
All right. So your honors was the results of that survey that you did.
Yeah.
Is there anything else? Like, did you kind of build on that?
Not quite. So for my master's dissertation, I basically did the same thing, but without the mindfulness component.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I just studied the social comparisons and the well-being outcomes of university athletes. So try to bring it over to that sport field first, and I really wanted to build it in steps so that I didn't get too ahead of myself. So I wanted to establish first that relative deprivation affects well-being. So I've done that now. We've kind of established that it does make a difference in negatively affecting athlete well-being. And for the PhD, I think I want to kind of bring in that mindfulness component with not just university athletes, but other athletes as well, so I can generalize a little bit better, and then take it one step further and see if I can do some sort of intervention as well.
Do you think that intervention will still be focused on athletes?
You know what? I hope so. Yeah, because I want to be the first to get to my area.
Yeah.
I don't want to be scooped by someone else.
Right.
So I really want to see if I can do all my work quickly and publish very quickly so that I can be first. Because, it's...
Right, that is kind of the thing with graduate research, is that
Definitely.
You don't want to be stolen.
Yeah. That's the cutthroat business of academia that no one talks about, and it gets swept under the table. But it is cutthroat, and if you're not first, you're last.
And I mean, with a topic like mindfulness, I'm sure that a lot of people have a lot to gain from understanding this stuff, which is great. You want a lot of people working on it.
Yeah.
But it also, I guess, it is your livelihood as well. So.
It is, yeah. If I don't publish first, and then I don't get a job, and then I'm begging for food stamps and stuff like that.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, that's good that you have that niche of athletes. Were you surprised by any of the results of like comparing the effects on health? Like how problematic can these comparisons be to an athlete's health?
Yeah. So what the most interesting aspect of it is, I was totally wrong about the envy. The envy basically did nothing.
Okay.
It was not, you kind of think of it as predictors and outcomes. So A predicts B, so NV predicts well-being, and that didn't happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a big surprise. Like, benign envy did not correlate with pretty much anything except for conscientiousness, which is that personality aspect to conscientiousness. And malicious envy was kind of similar to relative deprivation. I believe the correlation was 0.3, so that's a low to medium correlation, but it didn't predict negative well-being outcomes. But relative deprivation did.
Okay.
So that's kind of why I say that they are separate, because relative deprivation might matter more so than envy.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. What did you see any like seriously negative health outcomes that like made you very concerned, or like were you kind of seeing those before you even went into the research?
You know what? It's kind of funny. There's a level of taking a step back when you look at research that probably, you don't quite get that empathy towards the numbers on the screen as much as you probably should have. And I've done research in child trauma and stuff like that as well. And, even though you acknowledge that these are human beings and, you have that in the back of your mind, when you're going through the numbers, it's definitely not front of mind. So I wouldn't say that I've noticed explicitly people who have deep concerns. And even if I did, I couldn't really reach out to them because it's about confidentiality, and, I can't tie their research to them either. So even if I did see that, oh no, like this person's really struggling, there's nothing I could really do about it.
Right. And it is, you are, I guess, kind of quantifying it as a number by that DAS score. So I guess you wouldn't really have like what do you call it? Like anecdotes to tell or anything, because it's all numbers.
Yeah, exactly. That would be something that I'd like to do more so in the intervention is a little bit of qualitative. In the sense that I'd love to get the athletes, when they do the intervention, to do like a diary and to talk about what they're going through, how they're doing with their mindfulness, if they're having a struggle on a couple of days, or if there's been a week of struggle, that sort of thing. And that's something that we could dive deeper into, which will be important in the future.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome back. So before we were talking about how you are thinking of doing more qualitative research for your PhD, but you also told me, I think, that you don't really know what your PhD proposal is yet. You just kind of have ideas floating around?
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, in a PhD, you have to do comprehensive examinations before you actually are allowed to propose. And so I have to complete the comprehensive exams between 12 and 24 months into my PhD program. So I'm hoping to do it next summer, do the comps, and then I would kind of propose after that within the next, year or so, and then hopefully take, a year or two to kind of do the data collection and analysis and stuff like that. So it is a while away. That's why PhDs take so long. Because you got a lot of things to do.
And what are you being tested on in those comprehensive exams?
It's a whole bunch of different stuff. To be honest, I don't really know.
Oh, okay. Is it every PhD student takes the same one, or does it depend on what you're studying? Yeah,
so it depends on the university, actually. So it varies university to university. Our instructor, our PhD kind of seminar instructor, Dr. Kando, basically said that Regina is one of the easier ones in the sense that you have 4 questions to answer. You study for about 6 months on a variety of topics. You get 4 questions and you get 2 weeks to answer those questions. And I imagine it's a lot of work and effort to answering those questions. And then you have an oral presentation or an oral test on it as well. And that's kind of the extent of it, but it's super stressful because if you don't pass, then they kick you out of grad school.
Yeah.
So you need to be on top of it and really focus your efforts and energy into it. And then you can continue on with the proposal.
Okay. All right. So you're just studying for that right now. I didn't know about that, by the way.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that I do, because I'm gonna factor that in when I'm thinking about whether I want a PhD.
Yeah.
But you also said that while you were working on that, you have some side projects that you're doing.
Yeah.
So what are you doing that is exciting to you right now?
Yeah, so right now, starting to kind of propose or put forth to ethics 2 projects. One of them is an extension of the master's thesis, where I do add that mindfulness component in, that dispositional mindfulness, and see if that kind of translates. And I'm thinking about doing a crowdflower study with that one, so that I can get hopefully some athletes who are continuing on now, but also some former collegiate athletes.
Oh, okay.
And so that I can see if the data and the evidence kind of supports not just in university athletes, but kind of all college athletes, current and former.
Okay.
And I should be able to get a larger sample size with that, because with my master's thesis, I only got 125 students at the end of it, and I'm hoping, I really want like 1,000.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, to really establish it as a real thing, honestly. It's something I can build on. And then the second project is kind of neat. We do concussion testing at the U of R.
Oh, yeah.
So all of our university athletes have to go through baseline testing before they start the season. It's kind of mandatory for most of them. It's a little bit different for all of them. It depends on what sport you play and how much actual testing you have to do. But one of the tests that we do is called a neural tracker. And you put on these 3D glasses and you watch a bunch of tennis balls bounce around on the screen, and you try and focus and remember 4 of them. They turn orange for about 2 seconds, and then you got to follow them. And if you do really well, it gets faster. If you don't do well, it gets slower. And so my kind of hypothesis is that people who are higher in mindfulness should have a higher attention and awareness in the present moment, and kind of that monitoring experience. So they should perform better on this task than someone with low mindfulness. And so we're going to test that.
Okay.
They'll just do like a quick little survey, and then they'll do the neural tracker exam or test, or however you want to call it, exercise, and see how that turns out.
Okay. So is that something that you would like publish like a research report for? Like, what would come out of that?
Yeah. So that's exactly it. Pretty much all the research that I do is hoping to publish it.
Oh, okay.
Because publish or perish is the academic motto, and I would prefer not to perish.
Wouldn't we all?
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, that's kind of the goal of all of the research projects.
Okay, so once you get like to a master's level, would you say that you're kind of constantly trying to publish things, or like when in your academic career did you start?
I suppose it depends on your goals, right? So like for myself, because I have the goal of a career in academia, I've been constantly thinking about publishing and trying to get published research out there. Like I've got 4 publications already, which is ahead of where most master's students are. I believe the statistic in psychology is most master's students finish their master's with 1 publication.
Mm-hmm.
So I've got 3 more right now, and I'm kind of hoping to publish at minimum 2 per year for my entire PhD. So that would roughly get me around 15 or so by the time I finish, hopefully, again. And that would make me more hireable.
Yeah.
And that's kind of my goal, is to work my ass off and publish as much as I possibly can.
Right. And where do you submit to? What kind of journals have been interested in your work?
So no journals have been interested in my work
yet. Okay. I'm sorry to wound you.
But right now, one of the target journals is Journal of the Sports Psychologist. So that's one of them. Journal of Sport and Exercise Psychology would be another target journal. Maybe it gets into mindfulness. There's a journal called Mindfulness,
Oh,
actually.
cool.
And so some of the mindfulness research I'm going to try and publish in there because it's a really good journal, and it's growing and it's becoming more accepted in the field. And that's the other thing too, is you don't just want to publish in shit journals, you need to publish in the good journals. So yeah.
So where are your publications? Where could people read them if they wanted to read them?
Yeah. So I usually direct people to go to my ResearchGate profile. If you just Google in ResearchGate, Tyler Meadows or Tyler J.S. Meadows, I usually add my middle initials in there every time.
Okay.
That's something that's kind of been important to me, and you might have to create like a free account on there to actually view it, but all the studies that I do put on there are free. You can just click and there's a PDF link to them, and you can read them all from there.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Is ResearchGate commonly used among most grad students, you would say?
You know what? I think it's huge. It is. I think, in my opinion, it's the best social network for researchers. In terms, like, I can look up a lot of people's articles, and I can look up professors whose research interests me and see what they're doing next, and see what, I can get notifications on their publications and stuff like that too. So it's quite good. Google Scholar is actually getting pretty good at it too.
Oh, really?
In terms of
Like as a social platform?
kind of. So you actually get a Google profile if you've got research, and so I can look up people and their profile, and I can get alerts when Google Scholar gets notification that they've published.
Wow.
So yeah, no, it's really helpful when you're following researchers who, for example, created that mindfulness acceptance theory.
Right.
So that theoretical framework, I've actually made sure that I get a notification every time someone cites that paper.
Oh, that's
so that I
awesome.
can read it. I can read the updated research that is using that framework as a basis for their research.
Right, because then you can really stay on top of it.
Yeah. I've been with 1,000 mindfulness articles published per year.
Yeah, you need that, right?
Yeah, you need that. You can't find them all. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, those are some good tips for me as well. I remember the other day I downloaded a bunch of apps that help me look at papers, like academic papers from journals.
Yeah.
And I was trying to figure out, like, how do people keep on top of this? Like, you can't subscribe to every journal, you got to figure out how to leaf through this. So it's good to know those little tips and tricks.
I found for myself the best thing is to go to one of the journals that's most relevant to your research, and then just download all the PDFs from, say, the last 3 years. And that'll give you probably 150, 200 articles to read. And it's overwhelming when you do all that. But if you just kind of take it day by day, just kind of read 1 to 2 articles a day, kind of break it down like that. That's what I found most helpful for myself, and helping myself not be overwhelmed by the amount of work and reading that you have to do as well.
Yeah. Oh boy, it is a lot of work.
It is, yeah.
Well, do you think this is a good? Is there anything else? Like, do you have any messages that you want to send to people in general, like with your research? Some scholars kind of have I don't know, like something that they want people to understand from what they've did. Do you kind of have any beginnings of that going on?
If I'm being honest, no.
No?
I feel like mindfulness is out there as self-help opportunity. There's tons of apps. You're hearing about it all the time. There's biofeedback with mindfulness headbands where they measure your brain waves to make sure and it gives you feedback to if you're in a relaxed state or not. It's crazy. There's so much out there for people. So I'm just trying to focus on getting my research out there. Hopefully once the actual intervention studies kind of come out, maybe that might be helpful. I might have a message more for athletes when that time comes. But as for right now, no, not really.
Just staying on top of the trend.
Yeah,
is the name of the game.
Yeah. It's trying to be first to publish, trying to be first in my field. That's number one priority for me.
All right. Well, Tyler, it's been a very interesting conversation. didn't know about sports psychology as a field before this, so coming away with lots of knowledge. And Tyler, do you want to share your Twitter or your LinkedIn or anything like that?
Yeah. Just the ResearchGate, actually.
Just the ResearchGate?
ResearchGate is probably my main social platform, if I'm being honest.
Okay,
Yeah.
sweet. Yeah, we will also plug that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks so much for having me on the number 1 episode of your thesis.
Yeah, you did it.